I've always enjoyed late night walks. There's something about the stillness that makes everything feel simpler. I'm a welder by trade, been doing it for over 40 years now. I live alone on a big farm, just me and my dog Bosley. The house is too large for one person, but I never had the heart to downsize after my wife Maria passed away. My kids moved out years ago, and ever since cancer took her, it's just been me and Bosley. One night after a long day in the shop, I decided to go for a walk. My property is pretty big, so just a single loop is usually enough to satisfy my craving. The air was cool and Bosley trotted along beside me. Sometimes I think he likes me more than I like him. I've walked that loop hundreds of times, but as I was heading back toward the house, something caught my eye. I glanced up at the second-story window, the one that looks out from the bedroom Maria and I used to share. For a split second I thought I saw something move. I stopped dead in my tracks, staring up at that window. There was no reason anyone should be in there. I hadn't been in that room in years, couldn't bring myself to. I felt my blood start to boil at the thought of some stranger breaking into my house. I wasn't going to stand for that. I rushed inside, my heart racing, and ran upstairs. The room was empty, just like I'd left it, no sign of anything out of place. I looked everywhere imaginable, but found nothing. Yes, I was pretty freaked out, but I was more angry than anything. I didn't take this kind of thing lightly. I figured I had just seen something that wasn't there. I stood there for a while feeling foolish, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there. The next night, I woke up to Bosley growling. He's a good dog, never barks unless there's something to bark at. I sat up in my bed listening. That's when I heard creaking coming from upstairs. It could have just been the sounds of my old house, but my mind went directly to footsteps which were coming from right above me. I'm sure you could guess which room is directly above mine. I debated grabbing my hunting rifle from downstairs, but didn't want to go that far if it came down to it. I was fully confident that I could take whatever was up there hand to hand. I grabbed my flashlight and went to check again. Nothing. The room was exactly the same, untouched. My anger was definitely starting to turn into anxiety at this point. Something didn't feel right in the house. The following night I came downstairs to find the kitchen lights on. I know I turned them off before bed. I don't leave lights on. There was no question anymore. Someone was in my house. I started to panic. I called the police and told them I thought someone might be sneaking around. They came out, searched the house from top to bottom, but found nothing. They were nice about it, told me to call again if I needed them, but I could tell they didn't believe me. The following night was the worst by far. I couldn't sleep, so I went upstairs to check the bedroom again. I'm not sure why. Maybe I thought it would help me relax, but when I opened the door, I froze. I saw Maria's clothes all over the floor. I had packed them away after she passed away, but now they were everywhere. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I knew she wasn't Maria because she was too short. I didn't know who she was, but I couldn't tell she was there. I had never felt so terrified in my life, so I ran at her without thinking, and she turned and fled down the stairs and out the front door before I could get outside. The nightmare didn't end, though, because one night I was sitting in the living room when I noticed a figure standing in the yard looking straight at me through the window. It was her again, and my heart felt like it stopped. I grabbed my hunting rifle and ran outside, keeping Bosley close behind. I searched the property with Bee, but there was no sign of her, and I couldn't sleep for months after that. I was always on edge, convinced I heard footsteps upstairs at night, and every little noise set me off. I slept with my rifle next to my bed, afraid I would have to use it. She was only a shadow in the moonlight, observing me. I blasted a few warning rounds into the air in the hopes of frightening her away, which was sufficient to cause her to flee into the darkness, but it didn't really make me feel any better. I couldn't even begin to comprehend why I was being tormented by a random woman who was most likely homeless. I stood there for a while hoping she would return, but she never did, and I haven't seen her since. I know it will happen eventually, and I'm ready to defend myself, but I don't think it's sustainable to live in constant anxiety like this. Bosley is a blessing. I don't know what I would do without him, but I'll let you know if anything changes. Music, it's not the worst job in the world, but the hours are terrible and it's not what I expected to be doing with my life. By the time I get home, I'm either so wired from caffeine that I can't sleep or I pass out the moment I hit the bed and stay that way for 12 hours. I work for a catering service, so I'm on the road a lot, usually late at night. I spend the majority of my time lugging stuff from place to place in this enormous truck that the company requires me to drive. I was driving back home one night at like 2 a.m. It was nice to be driving my own car again. As I was approaching my house, I realized I had probably had one too many Red Bulls and there was no way I'd be able to sleep on top of that. I hadn't eaten in hours and I was starving. There's a McDonald's right off the highway about 10 minutes from my house. It's usually my first choice when it comes to late night snacks since it's just so convenient. I'm not even one to gorge myself on fast food. I just occasionally get this weird craving that only a handful of fries can satisfy. It's obviously 24/7, and I figured some comfort food would be the perfect thing to help me wind down. I don't remember exactly what time it was, but it was definitely after 2 by the time I pulled into the drive-thru. There were a few cars ahead of me, which I was actually kind of surprised by. It's not like this McDonald's was a busy spot at 2 a.m. On a Tuesday, as I was sitting there impatiently, I found myself staring off into space wondering what was taking so long. That's when I noticed something strange. There was an old beat-up Volkswagen with its windows tinted backed into a spot in the very corner of the lot. The McDonald's itself was only accepting drive-thru orders at this hour, so it didn't make sense why there'd be a car in the lot. There were reserved spots on the other side for employees, so it couldn't have been one of them. I figured it was maybe just someone eating in their car, which it probably was since I occasionally did that myself. I suppose I couldn't judge. It was just, to be very honest, a strange sight. I grabbed my meal and drove off, trying to think of a decent spot to eat it quickly because I didn't want to drive home just yet, but also didn't want to sit there and idle my car. There are actually a lot of possibilities because I live in a rather lush region, but given how late it was, I didn't want to mince words. Located on a mountain and essentially consisting of a vast forest, there is a huge nature preserve just down the street from my house. The best part is that there is a scenic lookout point at the top with a view of the city. A road circles the preserve and leads directly to the top, which is pleasant during the day after it closes. Although the road is close to cars, it is still a practical way to reach the top without going through any woods. It was kind of a go-to place for me and my high school pals if we wanted to be outside. We would hang out, chat, smoke, or simply enjoy the scenery. I had not been there in a long time because I was always working, so I thought that going there would give me a much-needed rush of nostalgia. However, when I arrived at the preserve parking area, it was completely deserted. I say parking area because it wasn't a typical lot with spaces for cars, but rather a large gravel patch that branched off from one of the roads that ran past the preserve's border. As I mentioned earlier, the preserve itself was closed, so I would have to walk all the way up to the lookout spot from outside before I could even turn off the engine. I was looking at the same VOG wagon from the McDonald's parking lot when I noticed headlights pulling into the lot. It was already eerie enough, so I wondered who else would be here at 2 in the morning. I was positive of it. I parked a little distance away, and when the engine died, I started to feel uneasy. What were the chances that it would have happened spontaneously if they had followed me? My window was partially down, and as far as I could tell, that car was not playing any music, at least not that I could hear. After a minute or so, my dread began to subside, and I realized that they were most likely doing the same thing. Even though I came to the conclusion that it was just one of those inexplicable coincidences, I couldn't get rid of the uneasy feeling I had while out for some fresh air or a smoke. It's a very popular area for that kind of thing. I debated for a minute whether I should just go home because I didn't want to go, but I also didn't want to be alone. I grabbed my phone and called a close friend who lived a short distance away, telling myself that if he didn't answer, I would simply eat in the car and drive. I was a little taken aback when Sebastian finally pulled into the parking lot. He claimed to have been up writing a paper, so I persuaded him to stop by and hang out for a while. I tried to shake it off, telling myself that I was being paranoid. When Sebastian finally pulled into the lot, I felt much better, and we both got out of our cars and started walking up the path before the parking lot completely disappeared. I glanced back, and the Volkswagen was still there, but I saw all 4 doors open at once. Four guys stepped out, and they stood there for a few seconds, staring at each other without even exchanging words. It was strange. I nudged SA, who realized what I was looking at before they could see us, and we kept walking up the path until the lot was blocked from view along. Bells were going off in my head, but Sebastian didn't seem that concerned. He told me they were probably just going out to smoke. We kept walking, and by the time we got to the top, the city view was enough to take my mind off things. We always sat on this little rock wall that was supposed to keep people from wandering off the edge of the mountain. We sat there eating and talking like we used to. It was as nice. Of course, that nice feeling didn't last very long. We heard the sound of talking and laughter. Quickly approaching us, we turned around to see three guys walking towards us sharing what looked like a blunt. They were acting friendly enough, which definitely calmed my nerves a little. Instead of finding their own spot, though, they walked right up to us like they wanted to start a conversation. The guy in the blunt was covered in tattoos and had a nose ring. He honestly looked pretty intimidating. He flashed half a smile before asking us if we wanted to smoke. We both said no, and one of the other guys laughed and called us, to which Sebastian scoffed at. My curiosity got the better of me, and I blurted out a question about what they were doing at McDonald's. The guy holding the blunt dropped his smile instantly and narrowed his eyes like he was caught off guard by my question. His two friends did the same, staring at us with cold expressions. They didn't say anything for an uncomfortably long time. That's when I remembered that there had been 4 guys in that car, not 3. One of them was missing. At that point, I was fully prepared to run. I knew Sebastian was thinking the same thing. Finally, the ringleader told us that he worked nights and that he had just gotten off. He pulled his hoodie up to reveal a McDonald's uniform. I think because he knew we wouldn't have believed him otherwise. He then went on to say he came to the spot every day after work to smoke with his friends. Well, that definitely calmed me down a bit. Something about this situation was terribly off, I could tell. Sebastian felt the same. We decided it was time to go. As we started walking down the path, Sebastian stopped and pointed into the trees. I followed his gaze and saw the 4th guy half hidden in the darkness. He was holding something, but I couldn't make out what it was. I felt my heart start racing. The moment he saw us looking, he started moving. That's when we ran. We bolted down the path, glancing back to see him chasing us with the 3 other guys close behind. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I could hear their footsteps getting closer, but I didn't look back again. We finally made it to the parking lot, jumped into our cars, and floored out of there. As I was speeding away, I could see those guys rushing to get in their car. I didn't feel comfortable driving home out of fear that I'd be leading them right to my house. I called Sebastian and told him we should meet back up on his street. We had a decent head start on them, and I don't think we were followed, but I wasn't taking any chances. When Sebastian and I met back up, we were still in shock about what the hell just happened. I don't know if they were trying to rob us or worse. I didn't know what to think. Sebastian showed me his phone and said he had snuck a picture of them while they weren't looking. He sent it to me, but I wasn't sure what to even do with it. I had off the next day, so I convinced Sebastian to come with me back to the McDonald's so we could at least report the employee. The next day, we approached a guy in the younger side in hopes that he'd listen to us. We showed him the picture and told him what happened, and his eyes widened. He told us something literally out of a horror movie. Apparently that guy's girlfriend had also worked at that same McDonald's and had dumped him a few months ago. He didn't take it well and would harass her while she was working and stalk her after her shifts. He obviously got fired, but that didn't help. The police were involved shortly after, and there was a restraining order put in place. Apparently he had been violating that restraining order because he was camping out in the parking lot. Sebastian and I were appalled. I don't know why he chose to follow me, but it was obvious that he was insane. I'm hoping the police catch him camping in the parking lot, because then he'll be destroyed. I just hope he doesn't recognize my car anywhere. It's only been a week, but I haven't returned to that McDonald's or the preserve because I'm hoping the police can take action, but that's beyond my control. Music. Please pardon me if I don't recall the entire story. It took place some time ago. Finding things to do in high school can be difficult because I grew up in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, where not much happens. So, a few friends and I would sneak into and explore old abandoned buildings. I didn't realize how popular that kind of stuff is until many years later, but apparently lots of people like to explore abandoned buildings. In any case, there was this abandoned church that we had visited a few times before. I actually remember the exact address. 198 Elmwood Avenue. It was eerie, but it was kind of our go-to place for late nights. There were 6 of us: Luna, Gina, Johnny, Max, and Ally. One fall evening, we decided to go to the church and have a little drink inside. It was cold outside and the air had a sharp sting to it. We had to climb an 8-foot chain link fence to enter the church, and once we were inside, the first thing you noticed was the floor, or lack thereof. The entire first floor was made of dirt, as if someone had torn out the floorboards years ago, leaving only a hole in the middle where a set of concrete stairs led down to the basement, which is where we always ended up. The basement had 3 rooms, but only one of them had a door. The other 2 just had door frames. The first room we entered was the large room, which had broken chairs, a busted couch, and some old furniture. I remember having to hush Johnny about a dozen times because he was a lightweight and the small amount of alcohol he had made him agitated and noisy. Being in such a large group was always a plus, though, and I felt much safer knowing we had numbers. We played around for a while, drinking and laughing as usual. I don't remember if there was music playing on the speaker, but I don't remember it completely. Suddenly, a door slammed, and I literally jumped because it was so loud. We froze, looking at each other with worried expressions. At first, I thought one of us had accidentally closed the door, but almost immediately, no one was around. Gina and Johnny fled, running up the stairs, leaving me behind. The 3 of us crept over to open the door that had slammed shut behind it. After standing in silence for a few minutes, I noticed a dresser with a cracked mirror and red stains smeared across the surface. At first, I thought it was old paint or something, but as I got closer, I realized something terrifying. The stains weren't completely dry, and Max and Ollie were the fearless ones, and none of us wanted to leave just yet. I can honestly admit that my heart was pounding, but I wasn't going to let the wind freak me out. The sheen to them seemed to have been there for a short while, and I started to doubt my decision to leave sooner rather than later. Then I noticed an old photograph on top of the dresser, a black and white picture of a woman in a wedding dress. She was smiling, but there was something strange about it. The whole thing made me uneasy, so I backed away, but as I turned, we heard another noise, this time from a different room, the room we had just been in. Max and Ally decided they had had enough, so we gathered our belongings and fled as quickly as we could. After we climbed back over the fence and hit the pavement, neither of us spoke, and I thought I saw the silhouette of a person standing in the open window. I still hope that, by some slim chance, my mind was just playing tricks on me, but I'll never be certain. My friends and I never returned there together for as long as we were friends, and I've actually been back to that church myself, though it was completely destroyed by the time I went to check it out again. I'm glad my friends were there to witness it with me, because if I had been alone, I might have doubted that the entire thing ever happened. If anyone wants to do some research, go ahead. I couldn't find anything online, but I wouldn't be shocked if that church has a history I'm unaware of.